Well, the Alec Baldwin trial is just right around the corner. What can we expect? We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to another Charlie Crimebuster Crime Talk.
That's right, James. Hey, this is our 4th of July edition, right?
That's right.
The eve of the 4th of July.
That's right.
So I guess you and I ought to take the time to wish all of our wonderful listeners out there and those who watch us on YouTube a happy 4th of July.
Mm-hmm. All of our peacemakers.
Yep, the peacemakers, especially the peacemakers. You know, those are the guys that have to work and keep us safe while we're enjoying our families and relaxing and celebrating what this country is really all about.
While at the Altamont Mall the other night, and actually observed them actually working, it's, you know, they don't just get to watch the fireworks but they have to do crowd control. In Altamont Springs, Florida, they have what's called a red hot boom. And it's a big event every single year, and it draws in thousands and thousands of people. It's there on Crane's Roost Lake there in Altamont, and it is a fantastic event, but it requires a lot of support from our men and women of law enforcement. And it's just amazing just to watch them work. And I've actually been a part of it. Actually, there's a facility there that I was actually running security for. And that facility is right next to the lake. And I've actually had the opportunity to meet many of our men and women of law enforcement there. So
that's a huge event here in Central Florida.
Big.
Yep. Yeah. Red hot and boom. Before we get into our program about the Russ trial, let me also encourage our listeners, if they have not yet checked out our Peacemaker Network website, we would love to invite them to go on over. It's peacemakernetwork.com. And there they can not only support the program, James, but they can also support those law enforcement folks that you and I were talking about, along with first responders and, of course, the military. So we would encourage you to go on and do it. And in case we forget, please, if you have not yet subscribed to the program, either as a podcast or the YouTube channel, just be sure and hit that subscribe button and be ready to listen to the next edition that comes out.
And also you can go to charliecrimebuster.com and listen to one of the previous episodes that has to do with the Russ trial, when the armorer who was actually handling the weapons was, we covered that case as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. We've covered a lot of it, but well, this one's right around the corner, I think. And the good news for all of us crime buffs out there is that I just found out that they're going to be live streaming this trial.
Right.
And I think it's around July the 9th or July the 10th. Mm-hmm. There's when it's scheduled to kick off. So there are plenty of ways. Just Google how you can live stream it and you'll be able to live stream it. But hey, if you don't have the time to watch that trial in its entirety, don't worry. James and I will bring you up to date.
That's right.
Our weekly podcast. Correct?
That is right.
Yep.
So, well, it just for those that are just now tuning in and not aware of what's really going on, what is the Russ trial really all about?
Well, the Russ trial is actually in October the 21st, 2021. It was at a movie set called, actually, it was at the Bonanza Creek Ranch. There's like 1,000 acres out there or more. And they have a movie set out there. And this movie set had a church in it. And Alec Baldwin was there in the church. And this, of course, is in Bonanza City, New Mexico, Santa Fe, right near Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Right.
And the cinematographer for Halyna Hutchins, sadly, was fatally shot, along with the director, who was Joel Sousa. And they were shot on the set of the film. And that was when actually Alec Baldwin had discharged, get this, a live round from the revolver that he was using as a prop. a live round actually caused this damage.
So
And
now, how does that happen, though?
well, we'll get into exactly how it happened, but I'd like to take a moment, James. We cover so many of these things, and I think sometimes we get so caught up in the trial part, in the prosecution part,
Mm-hmm.
that we do forget the victim.
Yep, that's
And
true.
we always on Charlie Crimebuster try to take time to honor the victim and the victim's family, and let people know that this might be fun for people who like to follow these things, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a sad, sad day for Halyna Hutchinson's family.
Truly.
And in looking up some stuff about her, she was, for by all means, everybody says a very warm person. She was very successful what she did. She would actually grew up on a military base there, a Russian military base,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she would like to refer to herself as an army brat.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally was there when she got really interested in film, and then went on to school and graduated with a degree in international journalism. And she worked on a lot of documentary films, this sort of thing. And she was there working on the set when this happened. And sadly, only 42 years of age when she lost her life, and had a little boy 9 years
Oh,
of age at home. So
oh, wow.
let's always remember that when we
Yeah.
cover things like this, that there's a victim in this, and the sad part about it is that this is something that really did not have to happen. There's just so many ways that this really could have been avoided.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But what did the authorities find out about the death investigation?
Well, when they did the investigation, they actually found that there were people that were not just negligent, but according to New Mexico law, they were criminally negligent.
Wow.
And there were actually three people that were charged. Um, First of all, there's the armorer on the set, which
Mm-hmm.
was Hannah Jitters Reed. And also, there was another person that was charged that some people may not know about, because there's been a lot in the news about Hannah, a lot in the news about Alec. But there was also the first assistant director, who also, David Halls, who also was charged and actually pled guilty. So three of them were charged: Hannah, Alec, and David Halls, and yet only one of them pled guilty. The other two have pled not guilty.
Well, then out of the three, then who was negligent?
Well, according to the prosecutor, all three. Yeah, according to that, was all three of them. Because and it really interesting though with Alec Baldwin. Of course, that's what everybody thinking about today, because he is such a famous actor,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and a lot of attention on him as well. But there was also Hannah, and of course the first assistant director. But beyond that, um, when you think about Alec Baldwin, he was first of all charged, James, and then they dropped the charges
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
against him, and everybody
Right.
thought it was all over. And then all of a sudden they brought him before a grand jury, and the grand jury indicted him. So this was probably a surprise to a lot of people, because a lot of people, and I know a lot of people think this way. Well, here's an actor, and money talks, and he probably has the most expensive lawyers and this sort of thing. And a
Right.
lot of people thought that he was going to get away with this. Well, he may still get away with it, but at least he's not getting away with the charges. He's having to fight these charges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the armor, how did she plead?
Well, she didn't really. She pled not guilty, and of course there was the trial. There's already been one trial in this,
Mm-hmm.
as most people probably know. And then we have and with David Hall. With David, of course, there was no trial, but there is the trial coming just around the corner with Alec Baldwin.
Oh, there's information here in the news that says that she's asking for early release.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, there's all kinds of maneuvering behind the scenes and this sort of thing with all of this. But I don't think she's going to get an early release. I mean, there may be, in some of these charges, if you do good time, it diminishes or it decreases your time. She may get that, but I'm not thinking that she's going to get an early release.
Well, she's claiming that the state withheld some evidence.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
possible?
Well, the interesting thing about it, when they were getting ready for Alec's a trial, and they were talking about when they were going to set the date for the trial, the attorneys there actually said that they needed a little time, and this was during the first trial, and they said that they had 30 more witnesses that they wanted to interview, and that blows my
Oh,
mind. I mean, 30 more
wow.
witnesses other than those that already been interviewed for the first trial. So I'm wondering
Oh, wow.
where are those people coming from? I mean, how many people were on that set? How many more people can you talk to?
Right, right,
So yeah,
right.
so there's going to be some new things introduced in this next trial, and probably some new witnesses as well.
Yeah. Well, what did we learn from the first trial that would probably help them prepare for this next trial?
Well, the thing that we really learn is as I've said, that oftentimes these trials is nothing more than a contest between the defense and the prosecution,
Hmm.
and they all have a story to tell. And so what we get from the first trial, we find how the prosecution frames the story and the charges, and how they played their hand, and we also see the hand of the defense, how they defended the armorer Hannah, how they defended her during that time.
Hmm.
And so probably maybe some of the same defense that they use, you could see in the coming one.
Right. Well, what did the prosecution have to say in the first trial?
Well, the prosecution basically came and said, of course, that Hannah, and remember, the first trial really wasn't aimed toward Alec. It was aimed toward the armorer Hannah, and they said that she was very, 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 very negligent. That she wasn't a very good armorer. That she was very careless. That she was disorganized, and that she did not check that weapon. Let's just go back and talk about what happened
Okay.
on that
Okay.
very day.
There we go.
Well, they were of course doing the filming. They'd filmed all day. Interesting enough, prior to that day, though, James, there were several camera people that had actually sent an email the night before, said they did not want to go on with filming because of all the unsafe practices that they had seen. Now, this was a night before this fatal tragedy. And so the next day, they decided they were still going to go ahead and film, but with fewer cameras. And they had gone to the church there, the set of the church there at the Bonanza Farm there, and they were filming some film early in the morning,
Hmm.
and then they broke for lunch. Now, in this filming part, of course, Alec Baldwin was there in the church, sitting on a pew, and he was practicing his cross draw and that sort of thing. And so they broke for lunch, and when they came back from lunch, according to the prosecution, uh, Hannah, who has the responsibility of making sure that the weapon is safe, she got the gun out of the safe, brought it to the first director, the first assistant director, and then he took a real quick look at it, and then they handed it to Baldwin, and he turned around, and he was practicing his cross draw, and the weapon discharged and killed her. Now, one thing I want to say too, a lot of people don't understand that this weapon was it was like a Western revolver. It was a 6 shooter, but it was actually, even though it looked old, it was brand new. Actually, they had actually bought it right straight from the manufacturing people. And so here was the weapon in Alec's hand, and the weapon was discharged, and unfortunately she was killed, and there was even another guy who was actually wounded during that time. um, I think a lot of people don't understand too. Also, we hear about these kind of things filming. We think, well, there's supposed to be blanks in a gun. A lot of people don't realize there's a difference between a blank and a dummy.
Right.
You see,
Right.
a blank, is very easy. You can very easily see a blank by the way the bullet is shaped. It's empty
Exactly.
chamber, and and
Exactly.
and there's pressure, and then you hear a pop, and then there's some smoke that comes out. Well,
Right.
those dummy bullets, though, those dummy bullets, um, that ammo really looks just like a real bullet. And of course, it's trying to keep authentic for the people that are watching the movie. But
Right.
it's shaped just like a bullet. It looks just like a bullet. And there's only really three ways that you can tell a dummy bullet from a real live round. One of the ways is that you can take that bullet and you can shake it, and if it shakes it, it makes noise because there's little tidbits in there that will rattle. Another way that you can tell it's a dummy bullet is that there's sometimes holes in the side of it. But one of the best ways to tell that it's a dummy bullet is that on any bullet at the very bottom of it, where it sits flat against the surface, there is what is called the primer, and it's a little button, little gray button. And if you see that little gray button there, then there's a primer there, and that's a real bullet. So there are three ways that you should be able to tell a dummy bullet from a real bullet. Now, the tragedy of this is that there is no way in the world no reason why there should be a live round on that set. But this was, when they went back to do the next part of the filming after the lunch break, there was 5 dummy rounds, they thought, inside the chamber, and she took another dummy round and put it in that 6th chamber, and then turned it over to the first assistant director. Now, the job of the armor, first of all, is when she took that weapon out of the safe, she should have right then examined all of those bullets.
Emptied all chambers.
Sure, make sure that they all were dummy rounds and not a live round.
Right.
She failed to do that. There was a second fail-safe, was when she hands this to the director, the first assistant director, he too is supposed to check that weapon to make sure that there's no, live rounds in there. Well, the only way that he did that is she just opened the chamber, spun it around a little bit, and he took a very quick look at it, and he did not check all those rounds. So, if she had done her job, if he had done his job, this tragedy could have been avoided. Right. And then there's even a third one, because once he handed the weapon to the actor, Alec Baldwin, and he said, the weapon is cold. In other words, the weapon's okay. Then the actor too has an opportunity to say, hey, let me see and let me check as well.
Right.
So Alec didn't check, the first director didn't check, and she did not check. Now, according to the defense, in the first trial, they said that she wanted to check that second time, but that the director said, we're in a hurry, we've got to move on with this. So it's just sad, because here's the thing about it. We're looking at this trial, but sadly this life could have been saved if they were just following protocol. Right. And the other thing is there is no reason, again, for a live round to be on the set. But when the police came right after the shooting and she was airlifted out, at that point, they were hoping that her life would be saved. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries on the way to the hospital. But when the police got there, they immediately confiscated these rounds, these dummy rounds, and there were like 37 of them. And did you know, James, that in looking in their investigation, they found not only one live round, but ultimately they found 6 live rounds in their investigation.
Wow.
That was on that set. So
yeah, I didn't know that. That's
wow. And again, no reason for a live round to ever be on a set. But now here's the interesting thing that the prosecution, when we're talking about what the prosecution is going, the prosecution, and many people think that this is what really turned the jury, because the defense had a lot of good things to say about how Hannah was being used as the scapegoat in this whole thing,
Right.
And how she was, that everybody, there was a lot of people irresponsible, but seemed like all the blame went on her. But what I saw in the jury that I think really made the difference was both Hannah was negligent. The first director was negligent. Alec Baldwin was negligent. But the real question is, who brought those live rounds to the set?
Well, I
And
had also read that they were actually shooting some cans or some jars or some bottles out on the side there on the side of the hill or something earlier
yeah,
in the
yeah,
day.
there was the, there were that has been printed and that has been said. I don't know that it's been proven, but it has been said, and we even covered that in our podcast.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Uh, but again, the thing is that there was some other ammo that came onto the set, but they pretty well proved in the first trial that that other ammo that came on the set was actually real dummy rounds. So the first part, the ammo with the live rounds, they pretty well pinned it on the fact that Hannah herself brought those live rounds to the set.
mm-hmm.
And I think that that was probably what really pushed the jury, because this there was no reason to bring live rounds on a set.
Right, right,
It's dangerous.
right. Well, Charlie, what do you think the focus is going to be in Baldwin's prosecution?
Well, I think if you go back and think about what the defense said and trying to defend Hannah, you're going to find a lot of what the prosecution is going to say. The defense said that that number one, Alec Baldwin, he was also the producer of this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
He was the leading guy in this. He was the guy in charge, you might say, and he allowed all these unsafe practices to continue. There's even texts where Hannah had actually sent texts, said we need more time, we need to spend more time with safety training and this sort
mm-hmm.
of thing, and
Right.
this was all ignored. And he was one who wanted to, this was a low budget film.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to get it done as quickly as he could, of course, to save money.
Right. Right.
And he cut a lot of shortcuts with it. He knew what he was doing. And here's another thing, there's two rules that is true on any gun range you ever go on, and it's just as true on a movie set. And that one rule is this: never point
Point
a
a
weapon
weapon
at a
at
person.
anyone. Yep.
Never,
Exactly.
never, never do it. You just don't do it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a no. The second one is you assume that every weapon is loaded.
Correct.
Those are two things. Folks, if you're listening to me and you have weapons in your home, those are two things that you need to practice. Make sure everybody around that weapon knows it. Number one, never ever point a weapon at a person unless you really need to use it for that purpose.
Correct.
Number two, assume that every single weapon is loaded. I cannot tell you how many police officers across this country
Mm-hmm.
have had accidental discharges
Right.
because they have not followed those two rules. And this is something that Alec Baldwin did not do. He pointed that weapon. That there was even times in the trial brought out that he would use it as a pointer. Point this or that out. As he was pointing around, and he should have known better. The third thing that they put press on, they said Alec Baldwin was the one in the church. Hannah wasn't in the church. Alec Baldwin was in the church. He's the one that pointed the weapon. He is the one who's either it was cocked or his finger was on the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Neither of those two things should have happened. That gun should have never been cocked, should never been pointed at anybody, and his finger should never be on the trigger. And so, I believe he is at fault with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's what you're going to see. The prosecution is going to bear down on that here is a guy who's responsible for the safety. And plus, OSHA also came in there and they had a lot of things to say about safety practices. In fact, did you know, James, that this film actually they ended up paying the most hefty fine of any movie at any time through OSHA because of their practices?
Wow. Wow. Well, what do you think that the jury's going to do with this? With all the
Pardon me.
evidence with all the evidence that we have thus far from the previous trial and also what they've gathered since then against Alex. I mean,
You know,
I know they've destroyed the weapon, so you really don't have any weapon now
right?
because they did all that during the
Yeah,
FBI.
I mean, yeah,
FBI did their testing.
yeah, ended up destroying the weapon, but it was pretty well proven that the weapon was not malfunctioning. These are experts that looked at it.
Hmm.
So again, I go back to this again. The weapon should never have been pointed at anybody.
No.
He should never have had his finger on the trigger. He said his finger was not on the trigger, but the experts say there's no way that weapon would have been discharged without his finger being on the trigger.
Well, but what if he cocked it with his thumb and his thumb slipped?
Well, yes, if while he was cocking it, it slipped.
Mm-hmm,
But if
mm-hmm.
he cocked it, it stays in a cocked position.
Well, but if you sometimes it doesn't always latch and it'll release, because I've had that happen to me. It's actually
that's because you didn't fully cock it.
correct.
If he fully cocked it, there's no way that should have gone off unless his finger hit the trigger. Now, if he didn't fully cock it, if he just put it back and let it fly without it being all the way cocked, that is a way that it could have discharged. But again, I just get back to it: pointing a weapon at a person. Come on.
Well, they were
and now here's the other thing too. When they were there that afternoon, they were doing what they call blocking. When you do blocking,
yep,
setting it up. So they're setting up the lights and making sure everything's all set up.
Where you're supposed to stand, where you're supposed to, where the light is supposed to be. Yep.
There was no real reason why he should have a weapon at that point. They could have given him a stick. They could have given him a toy gun.
Right.
Why bring the weapon out there, and particularly when you didn't check it to make sure there was no live rounds there.
Do you think there'll be a new policy drawn up as a result of this?
I think there already has been. I've already read that they've really tightened down, on it. And I think if there's any good that can come from this, and I hesitate to say good, because what good can be out of somebody losing a mother and a wife and a daughter and that sort of thing. But if there's any good, perhaps this will help save other lives in the future by people learning from the mistakes of this, and let's hope that really happens.
I certainly hope future movies include training as part of their budget.
Yeah. The other thing is, you were asking me, and I figured you would ask me about what do I think the jury would say. I would love to hear what our audience thinks right now.
I would too.
I would like to see.
We ought to have we ought to have our audience actually, chime in and say, this is what we think is going to happen, or kind of get a consensus. We could put a poll out there on the YouTube to say, hey, what do you think? How do you think the jury is going to rule in this case?
Yeah, because you got two thoughts there. Number one, people are thinking, well, he's got money, he's got great attorneys, he's probably going to skate. On the other hand, people say, well, he pointed the weapon, and it's not that it's not so much, and this is something that I think it's really important to understand. Sure, it was the armorer's job to make sure there's no live rounds there. It was the first assistant's job to make sure there's no live rounds there, and they're negligent in that fact. But also, and they're saying, well, then it's wrong to prosecute Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, well, I'm not saying that he was responsible for making sure there wasn't a live round there, but he was responsible for not pointing that weapon at someone.
Correct.
And not letting that weapon discharge, because there's no reason. There's plenty of camera angles and this sort of thing that they can do that makes it look just as real without pointing the weapon at someone. So I think that's going to be the thrust of the prosecution. And what say ye out there out there with all of our fans and our wonderful folks of true crime? I'd like to see, how do you think it's going to run? It'd be great. It'd be great to see. How many think, number one, he'll be found guilty, and how many people think, number two, he will be found innocent? So tell them, James, how they can get back to us.
They can go to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's how they can actually put in their vote. They can also go to YouTube. They can go to our channel, which is go to youtube.com and at Charlie Crimebuster, and there will be a poll where you can actually put your response there on what you think the verdict will be in the Alec Baldwin Rust prosecution case.
And folks, if you get busy on this right now, during our next episode, we'll be able to give the results.
Exactly.
Of that poll,
exactly.
How many of you think that he's going to be found guilty? How many of you think he's going to be found innocent?
Trial starts next Tuesday, so we'd like to get the answers. We'd like to get the answers in before the jury goes to draw up their verdict. So
there you go. Well, James, I guess before everybody starts to celebrate the 4th, I guess we need to tell them our famous words, don't you?
Well, that and also too a crazy crook story if you have one.
There is a crazy crook story, and I think this is pretty fitting. There was this guy again in over in the next across the pond. I love this because I'm learning that all the idiots don't live here in America.
I
You know,
took the words right out of my mouth.
yeah, but he had actually broke into a bakery, but he went through the roof, and so when he went through the roof, he dropped down into the bakery, and he did not think this thing through because he figured out how to get in there, but guess what? He did not know how to get out of there.
But Charlie, he was looking for the dough.
he found the dough, but he didn't find the go. He did not know how to go and get out of there after he was in there, and he kept trying. He tried to, he was. And this was all on video. It's funny as heck. It was all on video. He was trying to climb up on this. He was stacking things on it. Finally, he just gave up, and guess what? He called the cops. He said, "Please come and get me." So that indeed is our crazy crook story of the week.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. And everyone, please join us next week for Charlie Crimebuster. We're going to have a consensus on what everybody thinks of the trial. And also, we'll probably have another really crazy crook story as well.
So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.